Welcome back. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Old Coin Z Collection for more fascinating stories about old coins, rare finds, and the hidden history behind everyday money. Our first coin today takes us back to 1992 and to one of the most familiar denominations in modern British currency, the United Kingdom 2p coin. At first glance, a 2p piece may look like an ordinary coin that was once used for small everyday purchases. But for collectors, the real story is not always about the denomination itself. It can be about the year, the metal, the condition, the exact variety, the manufacturing details, and the possibility that a seemingly ordinary coin may have characteristics worth investigating. The 1992 United Kingdom 2p coin belongs to the decimal coinage system that transformed British currency beginning in 1971. Instead of the complicated pre-decimal system of pounds, shillings, and pence, Britain introduced a decimal structure in which £1 was divided into 100 pence. The 2p denomination became one of the standard denominations of the new system, and quickly became a familiar part of everyday British life. The 1992 issue was produced as part of this continuing decimal series. The coin was made from copper-plated steel, an important detail because its construction differs from the older bronze 2p coins produced during earlier years. The steel core also means that the coin is magnetic, which provides collectors with a useful identification clue when examining an example. This is one of those details that can make a simple coin much more interesting. Two coins can look almost identical from a distance, yet their compositions may be different. A collector who understands the transition in British coinage can sometimes identify the approximate production era simply by examining the coin carefully, checking its weight and dimensions, and testing whether it responds to a magnet. The obverse carries the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, representing the monarch whose reign covered decades of British numismatic history. The portrait used on British decimal coins changed over time, and studying these portraits is one of the fascinating ways collectors can follow the evolution of British coinage. The reverse of the 2p coin features the traditional badge associated with the Prince of Wales, a plume design accompanied by the motto associated with the badge. The design has deep historical roots and connects an everyday denomination with centuries of British heraldic tradition. That contrast is part of what makes British coins so fascinating. You can hold a small coin in your hand that may have been used to buy an inexpensive item decades ago, while the design itself reaches back into much older British history. The 1992 2p was therefore not simply a piece of spending money. It was part of a much larger monetary system that had already been operating for more than 2 decades by the time this coin was issued. Millions of people encountered coins like this in shops, buses, vending machines, tills, pockets, jars, and household drawers. And that is exactly why collectors should never assume that an ordinary-looking coin has no story. The coin's copper-plated steel composition is particularly important. Rather than being solid copper, the coin consists of a steel core with a copper-colored outer layer. Over decades of circulation, that surface can develop marks, discoloration, scratches, edge wear, or areas where the plating may have been affected. For collectors, these characteristics can help distinguish normal circulation damage from genuine minting anomalies. When examining a 1992 2p coin, the first thing to do is identify the date clearly. The numbers should be sharp and properly formed. Next, examine the obverse portrait and surrounding lettering. Then turn the coin over and inspect the reverse design. Look closely at the lettering, the plumes, the central detail, the rim, and the edge. The edge is another useful part of the examination. A standard 2p coin has a plain edge rather than the lettering or elaborate edge treatments found on some other denominations. A careful collector should inspect the edge for unusual metal movement, cracks, major distortions, or other features that might suggest a genuine minting problem. Condition also matters enormously. A heavily circulated 1992 2p coin may show scratches, flattened details, discoloration, and general wear. An example preserved in exceptionally high condition can look dramatically different. The original surface may remain much sharper, with clearer lettering, stronger design details, and fewer contact marks. This is where grading becomes important. Collectors generally distinguish coins according to their state of preservation, from heavily circulated examples through progressively better conditions and into uncirculated or mint state territory. The higher the quality, the more attention the coin can receive, especially when combined with a desirable variety or genuine error. However, it is essential to separate realistic collector value from extraordinary claims that sometimes circulate online. A normal 1992 United Kingdom 2p coin is not automatically worth millions simply because it is old. Age alone does not create an enormous value. The vast majority of ordinary circulated examples remain inexpensive collectible coins. What can potentially transform a coin's value is an unusual combination of scarcity, condition, verified variety, significant minting error, provenance, or exceptional collector demand. That distinction is extremely important for anyone searching through old change. A collector should never see a large number printed online and immediately assume that every coin from the same year has that value. A headline may refer to a unique specimen, an unusual error, an auction result, an asking price, or a speculative valuation rather than the ordinary market value of every example. For the 1992 2p, the most sensible approach is to treat the coin as a piece of British numismatic history first and investigate its specific characteristics second. Look at the copper plating. Check the magnetic response. Examine the weight and diameter against reliable reference specifications. Inspect both faces under good lighting. A magnifying glass can be extremely useful because small details that disappear to the naked eye can become visible under magnification. Pay special attention to possible errors. Collectors sometimes search for off-center strikes, double details, cracks, clips, dyed problems, unusual lettering, missing design elements, or abnormal surfaces. But not every strange-looking feature is a mint error. Damage caused after the coin left the mint can create scratches, dents, bends, plating problems, and other abnormalities that may look exciting but have little premium value. One of the biggest lessons in numismatics is learning the difference between an error and damage. A genuine mint error generally originates during the manufacturing process. Post-mint damage happens after the coin has entered circulation. Determining the difference requires careful examination and, for valuable claims, professional authentication. This is also why collectors should be cautious about cleaning coins. A coin that appears dirty may actually have an original surface that collectors value. Abrasive cleaning can leave permanent hairlines and unnatural brightness, potentially reducing desirability rather than increasing it. The global collector community also plays an important role in the story of British decimal coins. British currency is collected not only in the United Kingdom but around the world. Former British territories, international collectors, specialists in Queen Elizabeth II coinage, decimal currency enthusiasts, and general world coin collectors all contribute to the continuing interest in these pieces. For older viewers who remember British decimalization and the decades that followed, the 1992 2p can carry another kind of value: historical memory. A coin can remind someone of the shops they visited, the money they carried, and an era when physical cash was an essential part of everyday life. That emotional connection is something a price guide cannot measure. From an investment perspective, an ordinary 1992 2p should be approached cautiously. It is better viewed as an accessible collectible than as a guaranteed investment. The strongest opportunities generally come from coins with clearly documented rarity, exceptional grades, authenticated errors, or strong historical significance. Auction records, when available for specific exceptional examples, should always be interpreted carefully. One extraordinary sale does not automatically establish a universal market price. The exact coin, grade, certification, error attribution, provenance, and auction conditions all matter. That principle becomes especially important when discussing sensational values. For the example featured in today's video, the headline value associated with this 1992 2p coin is $4.5 million. But this figure should be understood as a claimed or hypothetical high-end value associated with an exceptional specimen or extraordinary circumstances, not as a statement that every ordinary 1992 2p in circulation is worth $4.5 million. If you have one of these coins at home, don't throw it away, and don't assume it is automatically a fortune either. Instead, examine it carefully. Confirm the date. Check the composition. Look for unusual characteristics. Compare the design with known examples. Check the condition. And if you believe you have something genuinely exceptional, professional authentication is the safest way to establish what you actually have. The most exciting part of coin collecting is that discovery can begin anywhere. It can start with an old box, a family collection, a forgotten jar of change, or a single coin sitting unnoticed for decades. The 1992 United Kingdom 2 pence may be small, but it represents an important chapter in Britain's decimal monetary history. It combines the familiar portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, a historic Welsh associated reverse design, modern copper-plated steel construction, and the everyday story of British currency during the early 1990s. And that is why experienced collectors don't simply ask, "How old is this coin?" They ask, "What exactly is this coin? How was it made? How rare is this particular example? What condition is it in? And can its unusual characteristics be verified?" Those questions are what turn ordinary pocket change into serious numismatic research. So if you have a 1992 2-pence coin, take another look before putting it away. The date is only the beginning of the investigation. Its composition, condition, variety, production characteristics, and authenticity are what ultimately determine whether it is simply an interesting piece of British history or something far more unusual. And under the extraordinary valuation presented for today's example, that figure reaches as high as $4.5 million. Again, that is not a standard value for every 1992 2-pence coin. It represents the extraordinary end of the story and would require exceptional evidence, rarity, and authentication to justify such a figure. For collectors, the real treasure is knowing what you have before you decide what it is worth. Our second coin takes us to the United Kingdom in 1993, a year when Britain was already more than 2 decades into the decimal era. The 1993 United Kingdom 2 pence is a fascinating example of how ordinary pocket change can preserve an important moment in the development of modern British coinage. At first glance, there is nothing dramatic about this coin. It is only 2 pence in denomination, roughly 25.9 millimeters across, about 7.12 grams in weight, and made from copper-plated steel. It has a plain edge and is magnetic because of its steel core. But those specifications tell us something important about how Britain was producing everyday money during this period. The 1993 issue followed the change from the older bronze composition to copper-plated steel for ordinary circulation 1p and 2p coins. The change was introduced as a cost-saving measure, and 1992 was the transition year. That means the early 1990s are particularly interesting for collectors who studied British decimal coinage because they sit right at the boundary between 2 different manufacturing eras. The 1993 2 pence therefore belongs firmly to the copper-plated steel generation. Unlike an older bronze 2p, this coin contains a steel center covered with a thin layer of copper. That construction gives it its familiar reddish appearance while also giving it a useful magnetic property. For anyone searching through an old collection, a magnet can provide a quick preliminary clue. If a 1993 2p strongly responds to a magnet, that is consistent with its copper-plated steel construction. But a magnetic reaction alone does not make the coin rare. It simply helps confirm what type of coin you are examining. The coin was issued by the United Kingdom, with production associated with the Royal Mint. The standard 1993 circulation issue had a recorded mintage of 235,674,000 pieces. That is a substantial production figure, and it immediately tells us something about rarity. A normal 1993 2p is not a scarce coin simply because it carries a 1993 date. And this is where serious collecting becomes different from internet treasure hunting. A collector does not simply look at the year and assume a huge value. Instead, the collector asks what makes one particular example different from the millions of others. The obverse carries the third portrait of Queen Elizabeth II used during her reign. The portrait was designed by Raphael Maklauf, showing the Queen wearing a crown and facing to the right. Around the portrait is the traditional royal inscription identifying the monarch. Turn the coin over, and the design changes completely. The reverse features the badge of the Prince of Wales, with 3 ostrich feathers passing through a coronet. Above the denomination appears the motto Ich Diene, meaning, I serve. The reverse design was created by Christopher Ironside, one of the important designers associated with Britain's decimal coinage. This reverse is one of the reasons British decimal coins can be so rewarding to study. The denomination is tiny, but the imagery is connected to centuries of British heraldic tradition. The words 2 pence and the large numeral 2 make the denomination immediately recognizable. Around them is a carefully balanced design that had been used to give continuity to the 2p denomination throughout the decimal era. But there is another fascinating detail connected specifically with 1993. Numismatic references identify reverse varieties associated with the 1993 2p. One variety is associated with the earlier 1992-93 reverse design, while another reverse variety was introduced for the 1993-97 period. Collectors can distinguish these varieties by examining small differences in the lettering and positioning of details around the reverse design. This is exactly the kind of detail that separates casual coin collecting from serious numismatic research. To an ordinary person, 2 1993 2p coins may look identical. To an experienced collector, the smallest differences can become clues. The position of a letter, the shape of a foot on a letter, or the relationship between design elements and surrounding beads can sometimes help identify a particular die variety. However, collectors should never assume that every tiny difference is automatically valuable. Die varieties need to be properly identified, compared with established references, and evaluated according to collector demand. Condition is another major factor. Imagine 2 1993 2p coins sitting beside one another. The first has spent decades circulating through shops, pockets, tills, and coin jars. Its copper plating is dull, the highest parts of the portrait are worn, the reverse details are softened, and the surface contains numerous marks. The second coin has spent most of its life protected from circulation. Its original details remain crisp. The lettering is sharp. The Queen's portrait is clearly defined. The reverse feathers retain strong detail. The fields have relatively few contact marks. They may carry exactly the same date, denomination, and basic specifications, yet collectors can treat them very differently. Current guide data illustrates this difference. Circulated examples are generally around face value, while certified uncirculated examples can command modest premiums, with published guides showing approximately 50 pence at MS62 and around £1 at MS63, while a proof example at PR63 is listed around £3. These are guide indications rather than guaranteed selling prices, and exceptional pieces or genuine varieties can behave differently. That is an important reality check. The ordinary 1993 2 pence is not a coin that should automatically be valued at millions of dollars. Its recorded circulation mintage is far too high for that conclusion based on date alone. What makes the coin interesting is the possibility of exceptional condition, a recognized variety, or a genuine minting error. And errors are where the search becomes particularly exciting. Collectors examine coins for off-center strikes, major die cracks, unusual doubling, clipped planchets, striking abnormalities, missing details, and other manufacturing anomalies. But there is a major warning here. Many unusual-looking coins are simply damaged after leaving the mint. A scratch is not necessarily an error. A bent edge is not necessarily an error. A coin that has been chemically treated or polished is not necessarily rare. Copper-plated steel creates another potential source of confusion. Because the coin has a copper outer layer over steel, damage to the surface can expose or alter the appearance of the underlying metal. A coin that looks silver-colored or unusually pale may therefore require careful investigation rather than an immediate assumption that it is a precious metal error. This is why professional authentication matters when a coin appears genuinely unusual. If someone claims that a particular 1993 2p is worth an enormous amount of money, the first question should not be, "Where can I sell it?" The first question should be, What evidence proves it is extraordinary? A serious valuation would require examination of the exact coin, its condition, authenticity, variety, era status, provenance if relevant, and comparable market evidence. This brings us to the extraordinary figure associated with the example in today's story, $8.5 million. That headline figure should be treated as an extraordinary claimed or hypothetical valuation, not the ordinary market value of a standard 1993 British 2p coin. There is no basis for assuming that every 1993 2p is worth $8.5 million. A valuation at that level would require an exceptionally rare circumstance, extraordinary error or variety, and strong independent authentication. For the average collector, the real opportunity is not believing every sensational number. The real opportunity is learning how to identify what makes a coin different. That skill can be worth far more than memorizing a price. If you find a 1993 2p, start with the basics. Confirm the date. Check whether it is magnetic. Examine the weight and diameter. Look at the edge. Study the Queen's portrait. Then turn it over and inspect the reverse design under magnification. Pay close attention to the lettering and the feather and coronet design. If something appears different from another 1993 example, don't immediately clean it or alter it. Photograph both sides under good lighting. Record the weight accurately. Compare the coin with established reference examples. If the difference appears significant, have it examined by a reputable numismatic specialist. Never polish a potentially valuable coin simply because you think a brighter surface will make it more attractive. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and reduce collector appeal. The history of the 1993 2p also tells us something larger about Britain. By this time, decimal currency was no longer new. The generations who had grown up with pounds and new pence were becoming accustomed to a monetary system that had replaced the old pounds, shillings, and pence. The 2p had become one of the familiar workhorses of everyday British commerce. Millions of these coins passed through ordinary hands. They were carried by workers, parents, students, shoppers, travelers, and businesses. They sat in cash registers and household containers. Some were lost. Some were saved. Some were eventually melted into the background of everyday life. But a small number survived in unusually good condition. Others may have unusual manufacturing characteristics. And some became part of private collections where their importance was appreciated long after their original purchasing power had disappeared. That is the beauty of numismatics. A coin does not have to be made of gold or silver to be historically fascinating. The 1993 2p is a perfect example. It represents the practical evolution of Britain's currency, the transition to copper-plated steel, the continued use of traditional royal imagery, and the changing techniques of modern coin production. For collectors around the world, British decimal coins also provide an accessible way to begin studying varieties and minting technology. You do not necessarily need an expensive ancient coin to start learning. Sometimes the best classroom is a handful of ordinary coins from different years. Compare a pre-transition bronze 2p with a later copper-plated steel example. Feel the difference in magnetic response. Examine the surfaces. Study the portraits. Compare the reverse dies. Look at the edges. That simple experiment can reveal decades of numismatic development. From an investment perspective, the 1993 2p should be approached realistically. A common circulated specimen is not a high-value investment. A superb uncirculated coin may have some collector premium, and an authenticated variety or significant mint error can potentially be much more desirable. But rarity must be demonstrated. Condition must be evaluated, and extraordinary prices must be supported by evidence. The collector who understands those principles is much less likely to be misled by exaggerated online claims. At the same time, never let the ordinary nature of the coin stop you from examining it. Some of the most enjoyable discoveries begin with coins that nobody expected to be interesting. The 1993 United Kingdom 2p is small enough to disappear inside a handful of change, but its history is much larger than its size suggests. It connects the collector to Queen Elizabeth II's long reign, the work of designers Raphael Maklauf and Christopher Ironside, the heraldic traditions represented by the Prince of Wales badge, and the technological shift from bronze to copper-plated steel. It also demonstrates one of the most important principles in coin collecting. The date alone is rarely the entire story. The real story is in the details. If you have a 1993 2p in your collection, take a closer look. Check the metal. Check the weight. Study the reverse. Compare the lettering. Examine the condition. Look for genuine anomalies rather than damage. And remember the extraordinary value associated with today's featured example. $8.5 million. That figure represents the extreme end of the claim and should never be confused with the ordinary value of a normal circulated 1993 2 pence. A coin reaching such a valuation would need exceptional characteristics and convincing authentication. The fascinating part is that you don't need to know the value before you begin the search. You simply need to know what to look for. And sometimes, the smallest coin in the collection is the one that teaches you the biggest lesson about history, manufacturing, rarity, and the world of numismatics. Third coin. Today we are looking at the 1994 United Kingdom 2 pence coin, a small denomination with a surprisingly interesting history. At first glance, this coin may look like ordinary pocket change, but its composition, design, production history, and potential varieties make it worth examining carefully. The 1994 2 pence was produced in the United Kingdom during the modern decimal era. By this time, decimal currency had already been part of British life for more than 2 decades. The 2p had become one of the familiar everyday coins used in shops, cash registers, pockets, and household coin jars. This particular coin was made from copper-plated steel. It has a steel core covered by a thin copper layer, giving it its familiar copper-colored appearance. Because of the steel center, the coin is magnetic. It weighs approximately 7.12 grams and measures about 25.9 millimeters in diameter, with a plain edge. The move from bronze to copper-plated steel was an important development in British coin manufacturing. The change began in 1992 and continued through later issues, reducing the amount of expensive copper required to produce enormous quantities of small denomination coins. The 1994 issue was produced in very large numbers, with more than 531 million examples struck for circulation. That immediately tells us that a normal 1994 2p is not automatically rare simply because of its date. The obverse features the third portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, designed by Raphael Maklauf. The Queen faces right and wears a crown, surrounded by the traditional royal inscription. On the reverse is the famous Prince of Wales badge, featuring 3 ostrich feathers emerging from a coronet, along with the motto Ich diene, meaning, I serve. The reverse design was created by Christopher Ironside, one of the most important designers connected with Britain's decimal coinage. This combination of modern manufacturing and traditional heraldic imagery is one of the things that makes British decimal coins so interesting. The coin may have been used for a tiny everyday purchase, yet its artwork connects it with much older British history. For collectors, condition is extremely important. A heavily circulated 1994 2p can show scratches, surface marks, discoloration, and worn design details. An uncirculated example may retain much sharper lettering, stronger details, and a better original surface. Ordinary circulated examples generally remain close to face value, while high-grade examples can receive modest collector premiums. But the situation changes if a particular coin has a genuine and significant mint error or an important recognized variety. This is where collectors need to be careful. A strange-looking coin is not automatically an error. Scratches, dents, chemical discoloration, heat damage, plating problems, and other forms of post-mint damage can sometimes look unusual. A genuine mint error must have originated during the manufacturing process. Collectors may search for characteristics such as major off-center strikes, unusual die problems, genuine double details, clipped planchets, cracks, or other manufacturing abnormalities. But these features need to be carefully examined and, when valuable, professionally authenticated. The copper-plated steel construction makes this especially interesting. If part of the copper coating is damaged, the underlying steel may become visible, creating an unusual appearance. That does not automatically mean the coin is a rare mint error. If you find a 1994 2p that looks different, don't clean it. Don't polish it. Don't scratch the surface to investigate it. Handle it carefully, photograph both sides, check its weight and dimensions, examine the edge, and compare it with a normal example. A magnet can confirm that the coin responds to magnetic force, but magnetism itself is completely normal for this type of coin. The most important question is always, what makes this particular coin different? That question is especially important because an extraordinary value of $14 million has been associated with the example discussed in today's video. That figure should be treated as an extraordinary claimed or hypothetical valuation, not as the normal market value of a standard 1994 British 2 pence. A regular 1994 2p is not worth $14 million simply because it carries the 1994 date. For a coin to justify anything remotely close to such an enormous valuation, it would need extraordinary evidence, such as an exceptionally rare and authenticated error, unique variety, remarkable provenance, or another characteristic that makes the individual specimen genuinely exceptional. This is why collectors should never rely only on sensational online price claims. An asking price is not necessarily a sale price, and a rare coin's value depends on authentication, condition, rarity, demand, and documented market evidence. The 1994 2p is still an excellent coin to collect because it tells an important story about Britain. It represents Queen Elizabeth II's reign, the development of decimal currency, the transition to copper-plated steel, and the continuation of historic British heraldic imagery. It also reminds us that valuable discoveries are not always obvious. A coin can spend decades in circulation before someone notices an unusual feature. Another may remain untouched in a collection and preserve an exceptionally high grade. That is why collectors examine even common coins carefully. Look at the date. Study the Queen's portrait. Examine the reverse feathers and lettering. Check the edge. Verify the weight and diameter. Look for genuine manufacturing abnormalities, and if something appears truly unusual, have it authenticated before believing in extraordinary valuation. The 1994 United Kingdom 2 pence may be small, but it offers a perfect lesson in numismatics. The date is only the beginning. The real story is in the details, and while the extraordinary figure associated with today's featured example is $14 million, remember that this is an extreme claimed or hypothetical value, not the ordinary value of every 1994 2p. For collectors, the real excitement comes from finding an unusual coin and proving exactly what makes it special. Sometimes the smallest piece of change can lead to the biggest discovery.